Alright, in this video, I want to explain to you why power is so important. You know, when I make these videos explaining the most important law of power, explaining image and all these sort of things, it may seem that I'm coming from a point of vanity and that this is just animalistic reasons. We want to control people, we want to have power over them. And it's something bigger than this. And the reason why I care about this channel, the reason why I personally feel so invited by power is because I understand its potential. I understand what you can do with it. As someone who believes in changing the world, as someone who has a deep desire to change the world, you know, I believe I was put on this earth by God for a reason, for a purpose. And without power, none of that is possible. You can be the most gifted person in the world, technically. You can be the smartest person ever. But if you do not know how to work with people, it's useless. Your ability to enact change, to make a difference, to be a revolutionary is impossible if you cannot effectively communicate, if you cannot influence and persuade. Those things are essential to power, and there's no other way about it. Of course, there are those who may argue that power is a modern concept of civilization that is held to repress us. Power is something that is only held by elites. And while that was definitely the case, a few hundred years ago, even 1,000 years ago, we live in a civilization where, first, knowledge is accessible to anyone. Anyone across the world has the same information that we do. The ranking that we have when it currently comes to wealth, that exists. We know that it exists. We know that there are billionaires, we know that there are millionaires, and there are people who are at the poverty line. We understand this. But when it comes to power, our ranking system is not direct. It's more indirect. It's something that doesn't truly exist in a visible form. What that means to you and I is that we can move up the ladders of power with grace and much more quickly than we could moving up the levels of wealth. Because the wealth is physical. It's a physical asset. Of course, money is used to buy things, but it's used as a tool. But power is where we can actually create change and move up the ladder very, very quickly if we have the right connections and if we have the right social grace. So the biggest point I want you to take away from this video is that, of course, people always argue against you, saying the evilness of power, how you aren't a right person, how you aren't a moral person. But the truth is that power, of course, is amoral. It's something that's so fundamental to our species. But if you really care about the world, if you really want to push humanity forward, if you care about ethical causes, if you care about fighting for animal rights, fighting for animal justice, if you care about the environment and the destruction that humans are causing, what good is it if you cannot first communicate effectively about your position? What good is it if you cannot have influence over other people to listen to your side? And finally, what good is it if you cannot actually have power over them? The truth is that the government can enact laws, they can enact legislation, and this can directly have power over people. But true power over the masses, over social groups, over human behavior as we know it. If you were able to have power over a culture, influence over, let's say, the Southeast Asian culture, and you were able to persuade them in your choosing, let's say you wanted them to no longer eat meat, for the sake of the example, that is much more powerful than any sort of legislative act can do. Of course, changing human behavior is the hardest, arguably, the hardest thing in this world to do. Because human behavior, as fickle as we know it, can swift like the wind. And there is no direct formula yet, that we know. But that doesn't mean it is not impossible. And the truth is, powerful people understand this. People who have attained the heights of power understand the importance of influence, the importance of image, tying these two things together. And they understand that if they want to enact real change, it's essential. And finally, the fact that power is much more indirect. We don't have direct monarchies in our societies. That fact makes it much more beautiful, in my opinion. What that means is someone growing up and living from the most poorest places in the world can attain the heights of power. And when you understand that it's quite beautiful. There is a freedom there, there's a privilege, and there's an ability for each one of us on this earth. Of course, we grow up in different circumstances, economically, financially, and background-wise. But given the access to information, we all have the same information. It's quite a beautiful thing then, wouldn't you say, that we all have the same chance of attaining the heights of power. And with that being said, when we look towards the future and we think about great innovators in this world, when we think about the great leaders of this nation and the nations around the world, as they are embarking on their mission to change the world, the first fundamental thing that they will have to hone and understand is power. And we will notice this in greater depth, especially as we are unraveling human behavior, unraveling human nature, understanding the roots of psychology. Once we understand human behavior, we'll understand how power moves and how the power equation, so to speak. This power equation that I'm speaking to is sort of mathematically and scientifically having a formulaic approach to understanding power. Once we understand that, then we will understand how human behavior will change and how ultimately our society will change. So I hope you enjoyed this video. Please be sure to give it a subscribe and a like. Share this content with anyone that you find useful. The goal of this channel is really to empower other people and to understand that to change the world, it all starts with one, and it all starts with having influence over others. So I hope you like this content. Stay tuned weekly for new videos. Thanks.